Imagine standing face to face with someone who survives only through control. They turn chaos into a weapon, twist the truth to manipulate, and make others doubt their own reality. That is the narcissist, someone who believes no one can see through the false mask they wear each day. But then comes a different kind of person, the super empath. Without shouting, without seeking revenge, they win through awareness, inner strength, and unshakable self-respect. The super empath doesn't just step out of the toxic cycle, they dismantle the very foundation of power the narcissist has built. In today's video, we'll uncover 5 ways a super empath silently, yet decisively destroys the narcissist's grip. This is not only a journey of breaking free from control, it is the path to becoming the strongest version of yourself, where no one, ever again, can manipulate your soul. 1. Reclaiming the self. When you know who you are, no one can define you. There is a painful truth anyone who has been in a relationship with a narcissist must face. They do not steal your money or possessions. What they take is far more devastating. They strip away your trust in yourself. They plant seeds of doubt in your mind, little by little turning you against your own memory, your feelings, your values. You start questioning whether you are too sensitive, whether you are to blame, whether you are even worthy of love. This is the pinnacle of manipulation, leaving the victim unsure of what is true, what is false, and even who they are. Yet, at that very breaking point, a door cracks open to awareness. Because when a super empath sees through the game, they begin the journey of reclaiming their true self, a turning point no narcissist can stop. Reclaiming the self is not a fleeting decision. It is a silent revolution within the soul. It begins by daring to look directly at the truth that you were deceived, controlled, forced to believe in an image that was never your own. The pain of acknowledging this is like reopening an old wound, but only then can you distinguish what truly belongs to you from what was imposed by someone else. Every cruel word, every condescending glance, every "you're too weak" or "you're too cold" is re-examined under new light. And then you learn to speak the liberating words. This is not me. This is only their projection. When you start separating your true essence from the smoke and mirrors built by others, you step into uncharted territory, self-awareness. This is the brightest light, because it dissolves the fog the narcissist used to blind you. From that moment, their gaslighting loses its power. They may keep throwing accusations, spinning dramatic narratives to put you on the defensive, but instead of panicking as you once did, you now quietly smile. You no longer argue to prove your truth, because you no longer need their validation to exist. And in that calm, piece by piece, you reclaim the power you once handed away. Reclaiming the self also means you stop looking for truth in the mouth of a liar. How many have waited for the day the narcissist would finally say, "You were right, I was wrong," or "I'm sorry for the pain I caused"? The harsh reality is that day will never come. A narcissist will never surrender power by admitting fault. And when you accept that, you also realize something profound. Truth doesn't require anyone's confirmation to exist. It has always been there, inside you, steady and undeniable. That is the moment the last key slips from their hand. They can no longer control you through your waiting. Reclaiming the self is also an act of rebirth. Once, you believed love meant enduring, that kindness meant sacrificing without limit, that if you were patient enough, one day they would change. But when your selfhood is restored, you grasp a crucial truth. Kindness never means tolerating emotional abuse. You begin learning to say no without guilt, to guard your boundaries without apology. You stand tall, with dignity, without needing praise to feel your worth. You learn to give the respect you once reserved for others now to yourself. And then, little by little, you realize you have become someone new. Not the broken, doubtful, fearful person the narcissist wanted you to be, but a stronger, clearer, freer version of yourself. This is the power the narcissist cannot bear, because it renders their entire game meaningless. When you know exactly who you are, they have nothing to cling to. When you no longer tremble at their silence or rage, they lose their familiar supply of energy. When you stop longing for apologies or recognition, they lose their final hook to hold you. What terrifies them most is not your anger, not your accusations, it is your serenity. The calmness of someone who knows themselves is unbearable to a narcissist. They can no longer shake you. They can no longer distort reality to make you doubt yourself. They can no longer force you to prove anything. Every arrow they shoot falls into emptiness, and for someone who lives by controlling the emotions of others, that emptiness is the heaviest sentence of all. Ultimately, reclaiming the self is a journey back home to yourself. It is not an outward fight, but an inward reconstruction, rebuilding trust, values, self-respect, and self-love. It is standing up not to shout that you have defeated someone else, but to quietly declare that you have defeated the doubt that once devoured your soul. And once you have done that, no one, not even the most cunning narcissist, can ever define you again. 2. Building boundaries. Turning kindness into strength instead of weakness. There is one painful reality that deeply compassionate people often face in toxic relationships. Their kindness becomes the very chain that binds them. The narcissist sees that generosity, recognizes that tender heart, and treats it as a gateway to walk in and out at will, to manipulate, to take, to dominate. A shallow apology, a staged tear, a belated hug, and suddenly they've crossed your line again, placing the weight back onto your shoulders. And you, driven by the instinct to heal, open your heart again, forgive again, sacrifice again. The cycle repeats until you no longer know where true kindness ends and exploitation begins. But one day, the heart of the super empath awakens, and they learn this profound truth. Kindness only has power when it is paired with clear boundaries. By building a fence around your soul, you transform kindness from a weakness into an unshakable strength. Building boundaries is not about constructing walls of isolation. It is about creating a gate for which only you hold the key. It is the declaration, I know my worth and I decide who is allowed into this space. For the narcissist, this is unbearable because they are accustomed to a world where others' boundaries are blurred, where they can intrude at will and rearrange everything to their advantage. When a super empath raises boundaries, the narcissist becomes like a habitual trespasser suddenly confronted with a locked door, and the key is forever out of reach. At first, setting boundaries can feel deeply uncomfortable. You've grown used to pleasing, to sacrificing, to explaining yourself at length, just to avoid being misunderstood. The first time you say no, you may tremble. The first time you refuse to help, you may feel guilty. The first time you remain silent in the face of an attack rather than rushing to defend yourself, your heart may feel heavy. But remember, this discomfort is the pain of growth. It is like working out after years of neglect, painful, sore, but proof of strength being born. A narcissist will never easily accept your boundaries. They will test them relentlessly. When you stay silent, they will rage. When you refuse, they will play the victim. When you stand firm, they will try to guilt trip you. You've changed. I don't matter to you anymore. Or, if you really loved me, you wouldn't say no. But this is where the matured super empath rises. They no longer fall into the scripts the narcissist sets. Instead of exploding or collapsing, they remain grounded in calm. No shouting, no endless arguments, just consistent action, holding the line. What the narcissist will never understand is this. Boundaries are not punishment, they are protection. They do not destroy love, they preserve it from distortion. When you say no to unreasonable demands, you are saying yes to your peace. When you refuse to let others cross the line, you affirm that your worth is not negotiable. And when you stop apologizing for existing, you show the world that kindness can coexist with power. Building boundaries doesn't mean you are cold. It means you are selective about where your energy goes. Once you gave without limit, only to end up empty. Now you know kindness is only beautiful when it is not coerced, not exploited, and not the sacrifice of your own soul for a toxic bond. This is the maturity of a super empath, still rich in love, but no longer easy prey. Once the fence is in place, you feel a profound shift within. No longer drained by endless emotional battles, you discover peace, energy, and safety. You no longer over-explain just to please. You no longer fear abandonment if you don't comply. You realize that inner peace is more valuable than external approval. And in that realization, you reclaim the strength that was always yours. The narcissist will test your fence again and again, but with every failed attempt, they lose more of their grip. They realize their tricks now land in emptiness. They see you are no longer someone who leaves the door open at all times. And little by little, they are forced to confront the truth. You are no longer their supply. That is the power of boundaries. Quiet, not dramatic, but steady and immovable. They transform kindness from an exploitable gift into a force that cannot be violated. And once you have learned to build boundaries, you will never return to the old state. Because now you know kindness is not submission. It is a choice. Not everyone deserves it. And no one has the right to cross your fence without your permission. 3. Releasing emotional dependence. When you stop reacting, they stop existing. There is a truth few realize when trapped in a relationship with a narcissist. What they crave most is not your love, nor even your presence, but your emotions. They live off your reactions, whether anger, pain, tears, or despair. Every outburst, every tear shed, every sleepless night caused by their words becomes fuel for their hollow ego. They don't need you to be happy, they only need you to keep thinking about them. And within that emotional dependence, you become a prisoner in a game where they control all the rules. But then one day, the super empath awakens. They realize the truth isn't about changing the narcissist, it's about releasing emotional dependence. And that shift shakes the very foundation of the narcissist's power. Think back. How many times did your heart tighten when they went silent? How many times did you feel anxious, scrambling to justify their coldness? How many hours did you spend crafting explanations in texts, only to receive indifference in return? In those moments, you gave away your most precious energy. You became the puppet while they pulled the strings. But once you begin to change, once you see that your reaction is their food, you understand that true strength lies in not reacting. Not because you are cold, but because you've realized your calm silence carries more weight than any frantic defense. Letting go of emotional dependence does not happen overnight. At first, it feels nearly impossible not to react. The urge to respond, to explain, to prove yourself rises in every cell. You wonder, if I don't speak, will they understand? If I don't react, will they think I'm wrong? But in those very moments of tension, you slowly discover you don't need them to understand. Truth does not depend on their approval. You no longer need validation from someone who never truly listened. And in that acceptance, you lay the first brick of your emotional freedom. What's striking is how the narcissist panics when you stop reacting. They are used to triggering chaos with just a frown, a harsh word, or a night of silence. They are used to you frantically texting, apologizing, begging. But when all their tactics are met with stillness, they are like an archer firing arrows at a stone wall. Every shot falls harmlessly to the ground. For someone who feeds on your emotional energy, this is a nightmare. Letting go of emotional dependence does not mean becoming numb. In fact, you become more alive than ever, not with emotions dictated by them, but with emotions born within yourself. You learn to smile at simple joys you create, not because of their approval. You learn to feel peace, even when they stir up storms. You learn to love yourself enough not to let your heart be an arena for someone else's battles. This is true power. Not needing to react to prove anything, yet standing firm in your own worth. Imagine a chess game. For so long, you played reactively, always moving in response to their calculated moves. They made one move, and you scrambled to counter, only to be led into a losing position. But when you step back, when you stop playing their game entirely, the board loses its meaning. They sit, waiting for your move, but the board remains still. That is the essence of releasing emotional dependence. When you withdraw from the game, the narcissist has no game left to play. Step by step, you notice their control slipping. Words that once stole your sleep now barely draw a shrug. Silences that once brought tears now become a space of quiet rest. Lies that once drove you to frantic defenses now echo into emptiness. And in that transformation, the narcissist becomes powerless. When you release emotional dependence, you learn something vital. Not everything deserves your reaction. You begin to choose what truly deserves your heart's response. Instead of wasting energy on empty games, you channel it into dreams, joy, and people who genuinely value you. You are no longer drained, you are self-nourished, fueled by peace. Finally, you realize your calm silence is the loudest declaration. I am no longer your supply. And once you reach that point, the narcissist doesn't just lose control, they lose the very reason for existing in your relationship. They may rage, they may beg, they may stage tearful performances, but none of it matters because you've taken the key out of their hands. The game ends not with a noisy battle, but with your quiet, decisive withdrawal. That is the power of releasing emotional dependence. It does not come from revenge, but from freedom. It is not coldness, but the choice of peace. It is not apathy, but the maturity to no longer let anyone else dictate your feelings. And once you arrive there, you not only escape the narcissist's control, you step into a world where you are the master of your own soul, where you are defined by no one but yourself. For, living in truth, light that exposes every darkness. If there is one kind of air the narcissist needs to survive, it is deception. They breathe distortion, weaving contradictory scripts to paint their victims as villains, masking their inner emptiness with layers of carefully crafted facades. Every lie they tell is not just a fabrication, it is a weapon of control. When you believe it, when you get pulled into endless debates, when you strive to prove the truth, you step right into the trap they've set. Yet the awakened super empath knows. Truth does not need to be argued. Truth does not need to scream to be heard. Truth simply needs to be lived, and its very presence is enough to bring every shadow into the open. When you choose to live in truth, you no longer waste energy chasing circular accusations. You no longer exhaust yourself explaining, hoping they will finally understand. You stand in truth like a steady flame, illuminating every false performance around you. And here lies the paradox. Light does not need to be loud nor showy, it only needs to exist. A calm statement like, "That's not true," carries more power than 1,000 frantic rebuttals. A clear silence holds more force than a scream born of despair. Living in truth means calling everything by its rightful name. A smear is a smear. Cruelty is cruelty. Manipulation is manipulation. You no longer sugarcoat, rationalize, or excuse the actions that have wounded you again and again, because you understand that each time you justify the narcissist, you betray yourself. And when you stop self-betrayal, the narcissist loses the fog that once cloaked their power. At first, truth can hurt. It strips away illusions you once clung to. It forces you to face that some people will never change, that the love you gave was never valued, that the sweet promises were only traps spun with deception. But when the pain settles, you discover that truth is liberation. It gives you new eyes, new ears, and a heart that discerns real from fake. And once you have seen the light, you cannot return to the dark. What terrifies the narcissist most is not your loud accusations, but your unwavering stance in truth. When they sneer, "You're too sensitive," you calmly affirm, "My feelings are real, and I have the right to feel them." When they deny an obvious act, you respond simply, "That happened." No more, no less, no argument. This quiet certainty is what unsettles them most, because it leaves them with nothing to twist. They cannot bend a truth you've already anchored so clearly. Living in truth also means stepping out of endless debates. You refuse to be dragged into the infinite whirlpool of who's right, who's wrong that never ends. You learn to release the need to prove because you understand truth does not require validation to exist. It stands alone, solid, indestructible. And in choosing to live this way, you grant yourself the gift of peace. The beauty of truth is that it not only frees you, it becomes a light for those around you. People begin to see the clarity in your life, your words, your choices. They sense that you are no longer swayed by lies, and that courage inspires them to confront truth in their own lives. Like one candle lighting 1,000 others, your flame spreads without ever diminishing. When you live in truth, you also attract healthier relationships. Because truth's light does more than chase away darkness, it draws in other hearts that shine. You realize you no longer need to trade self-respect to keep a connection. You no longer have to play blind to maintain a false peace. Truth allows you to build a foundation where love is genuine, giving is mutual, and your identity is never defined by another. The narcissist may continue to hide, may craft new masks, may weave fresh performances, but you know everything eventually surfaces under the light. A lie may survive for a day, a month, even years, but it cannot live forever once truth is seen. And every time you stand firmly in truth, another piece of their power dissolves, until in the end they are left alone with their shadows, with no one left deceived to sustain their illusion. That is the power of living in truth. It is not noisy, not dramatic, not vengeful. It is simply light. And light does not ask permission to shine. It comes, and darkness retreats. Once you choose to live this way, you not only break free from the narcissist's control, you step onto a new path, the path of clarity, of freedom, and of strength that can never be defeated. 5. Walking away. Not to escape, but to be reborn. There comes a moment that anyone entangled with a narcissist must face, the crossroads where you must choose between staying and enduring or walking away to reclaim yourself. For many, leaving feels impossible. They are trapped by fear, by guilt, by the belief that one day the narcissist will change. They think, if I'm more patient, more loving, more self-sacrificing, then things will get better. But the brutal truth is this: staying only prolongs the cycle, while walking away is the doorway to freedom. And when a mature super empath makes that choice, it is not an act of escape, it is an act of rebirth. Walking away is never easy. It feels like tearing out a piece of memory, leaving behind a dream once cherished, letting go of a part of yourself long tied to someone else. But walking away is also the bravest act, because it declares that you will no longer live under someone else's control. You will no longer allow a broken soul to define your worth. And you will no longer hand over your life to sustain the illusion of a narcissist. At first, leaving feels like unbearable emptiness. No more calls, no more texts, no more familiar arguments. The silence can be disorienting. You remember the sweet moments mixed in. You replay the promises left unfulfilled. Your mind tries to pull you back because habit is strong. But if you remain steadfast through that stage, you realize silence is no longer a void, it is space to breathe again. What the narcissist never believes is that you will truly leave. They live convinced you will always return, that your empathy will never let you walk away, that your kindness will trap you in forgiveness. That is why your decision to walk away shocks them the most. They will try to reel you back with tears, apologies, promises of change. If that fails, they will attack with anger, blame, even smear campaigns. Yet every attempt collapses because you have chosen a new path, a path that no longer includes them. Walking away is not only an external act, but an inner revolution. It begins with refusing to let your emotions be manipulated. You no longer leap into arguments to prove yourself. You no longer live in fear of their silence or rage. You no longer allow them to dictate the rhythm of your life. You begin to see that the greatest power was never in changing them, but in giving yourself permission to let go. And as you walk further, something miraculous unfolds. You begin to rediscover passions you once abandoned. You laugh more, not because someone allowed you to, but because you feel light again. You plan a future without fear of sabotage. You rebuild not to prove anything to anyone, but simply to live fully. That is when you realize walking away is not an ending, but an opening, a doorway into a new chapter. Walking away also sends a powerful message. I deserve more than this. That message is not just for the narcissist, it is for you. It affirms that you will no longer be complicit in your own destruction. It reminds you that you have the right to peace, to love, to live in alignment with your truth. And believing that creates space for healthy, genuine things to enter your life. Walking away is also how you reclaim authorship of your story. Before, you were like a character in someone else's script. They wrote your role, they defined you, they dictated when you laughed or cried. But by leaving, you become the author of your own life. You write new pages where you are no longer a side character in someone else's drama, but the protagonist of your own journey. Most importantly, walking away is not just about escaping a toxic relationship, it is about finding yourself again. You realize you were never weak, never dependent, never worthless, despite what they made you believe. On the contrary, you are strong, resilient, and wise enough to know your survival was never in their hands. That realization is the first spark of rebirth. Because walking away is not running. Running carries fear, walking carries choice. Running is abandonment. Walking is renewal. Running is fleeing from darkness. Walking is moving toward light. And when you walk away with a steady heart, you do more than leave a narcissist behind you. Step into a new journey, one of freedom, of peace, and of a soul reborn in strength. Looking back on this entire journey, we see a vital truth. The greatest strength of a super empath does not lie in how fiercely they fight back, but in their choice to no longer let themselves be defined by the narcissist. From reclaiming the self, to building firm boundaries, to releasing emotional dependence, to living in truth, and finally to walking away for rebirth, none of these are loud acts of retaliation. They are quiet, inner transformations of the soul. And it is precisely this silence that becomes the true earthquake, shaking the very foundation of the narcissist's power. The truth is, the narcissist never expects you to awaken. They never imagine that one day you will recognize your true worth, that you will dare to draw boundaries, that you will be calm enough not to react, that you will walk away without looking back. They only know you as dependent, forgiving, self-sacrificing. And so when you rise, when you choose light over darkness, when you refuse to be controlled ever again, that is the greatest victory. But remember, this victory is not about revenge. It is not about proving to them how strong you are. It is not about tearing anyone down. It is about reclaiming your life. It is about writing a new chapter where you are no longer the victim, but the living testimony of resilience, where you no longer live in fear of manipulation, but in peace of your own making, where you are no longer a shadow in someone else's story, but the light in your own. And from that peace you become living proof for others. You become inspiration for those still trapped, showing them that freedom is real, that healing is possible, that no one is destined to live forever in a prison of the mind. The light you carry does not only free you, it opens the way for others to step out of darkness. If you are hearing these words, take this as a reminder. You deserve a life of freedom. You deserve love that does not demand you lose yourself. You deserve peace no one can steal. And if you are ready, begin by believing in yourself. For once you know who you are, no narcissist will ever define you again. Thank you for walking with me through today's video. If what I've shared touched your heart, please hit subscribe so we can continue this journey together, the journey of turning pain into power, darkness into light, and you into the strongest version of yourself. Don't forget to like, share this video with those who need it, and leave a comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Your voice, too, can become a source of encouragement for someone else. Because in the end, the most important message remains: you are not defined by what you went through. You are defined by how you rise after it. And when you walk away not to escape, but to be reborn, that is the undeniable proof that light will always be stronger than darkness.